Good morning, everybody. My name is David Childs, and welcome to the Risk Management Professionals webinar series. Today, our producers are John Watterson and Korean Black. They're going to be in the background, keeping us operational, making sure everything is going smoothly. We're using GoToWebinar for this webinar today. If you have any technical difficulties, please call the number you see on the screen, 877-532-0806. We have staff available to help with any troubleshooting that you might have. So on your screen right now, you should see a picture of me and a copy of the slides for today that I'll be going through. There should be an interface tab in the middle, and you can slide it either direction to adjust the size to your needs. We also have a dialog box in the GoToWebinar service. If you have any questions during the presentation, just click on that, type them in, and we'll be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So today's presentation is going to be on the Nevada CAPP regulations and how to best prepare for an audit. Before we get into that though, I want to tell you a little bit about Risk Management Professionals. So we do this continuing webinar series to reach out to our clients and other people in industry to ensure that you guys are understanding what our core competencies are. We have a lot of experience in program development for Nevada CAPP, EPA RMP, OSHA PSM, CalARP, and other developments. We also do a lot of PHAs, mostly utilizing HAZOP and LOPA techniques. And we also do a variety of other things that you can see on the screen to meet other process safety regulations, such as security vulnerability analyses. So the topics for today's webinar are going to be, first, a quick regulatory overview of Nevada CAPP. We're going to be looking at the structure of the CAPP program. Then we're going to be looking at how CAPP performs their audits at the facilities. We're going to spend most of the time doing that and discussing tips in order to prepare for an audit most effectively. And we're going to end with a few sample checklist questions that Nevada CAPP looks at to give you guys a feel of the questions. And then we'll have our question and answer session. So we'll start with the regulatory overview. Nevada CAPP was founded in July of 1991. This was as a result of a very large chlorine leak in Henderson, Nevada. It resulted in 2 fatalities and 372 injuries back in May of 1991. So at this chlorine facility, there was a small hole in some piping. The system had an automatic monitoring system that detected the leak. Actions were taken in order to isolate the leak in order to prevent flow. However, due to the corrosive properties of chlorine, it quickly eroded through the wall and resulted in a massive leak of many tons of chlorine. Information about the chemicals that are covered by Nevada CAPP can be found at this link here. Anything that you want to see for Nevada CAPP, you can just Google Nevada CAPP. It'll be the first link, and that'll lead you to all of the things that we're talking about today. At this link here, you'll be able to find information about the chemicals of interest, along with their threshold quantities. I have here a chart. Sorry if the numbers are a little hard to see, but there are 3 different categories here. I have the CAPP thresholds, EPA thresholds, and the CAPP 2 release thresholds, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. As you can see, EPA thresholds are a little bit higher. The chemicals that I've chosen here, this is by no means a complete list, but I wanted to highlight the ones where CAPP was a little bit more stringent. So with ammonia, you can see based on the different concentrations, the different threshold quantities, along with chlorine, sulfur dioxide, nickel carbonyl, and boron trichloride. If you look at that 2 release threshold, the quantity is much lower. So this is for facilities that have been shown to have issues with releases in the past. If you have multiple releases at your facility, Nevada CAPP is going to lower your threshold quantity. So you might not have been covered within after a release, or a couple of them, due to the lower threshold quantities, you may become regulated. Here's a quick look at all of the CAPP elements. I'm going to go very briefly through all of them. The first, process safety information. This is going to have information regarding the equipment in your facility, such as PSBs, alarms, specifications for equipment such as tanks and pumps. The next one, process hazard analysis. It's a set of organized and systematic assessments. The one that I mentioned before, or the method that I mentioned before that RMP utilizes the most is HAZOP studies. Standard operating procedures. These are going to be descriptions of all the different operations that you do at your facility with your covered process. In the Nevada CAPP program, you need to ensure that you have a few specific procedures in place, such as startup, shutdown, emergency shutdown, turnaround, normal operations. You also want to discuss what happens if you deviate from those operations. You have your training module, which is going to be the element based on what you're doing to make sure that your people are properly trained and how you're documenting that. For contractors, you want to make sure that you have a contractor management program in place where you're discussing the expectations that you have at your facility from your contractor. Make sure that they're communicating with you how they're doing. Make sure you're watching the way that they're working. PSSR, or pre-startup safety review. This is going to be done anytime that you have a significant MOC at your facility. So anytime you have a large change before you start up the system again, this is going to be how you're checking your system for safety and making sure you're ready to start operations. Mechanical integrity program. This is going to be the maintenance of your facility. What are the intervals that you're maintaining equipment at, and what is covered under the MI program. HA, or hazard assessments, you might also know them as an off-site consequence analysis, looking at your largest container at your facility, what's going to happen under a worst case scenario if all of that was to be released. This is just to have an idea of the ultimate consequences possible at your facility. I already mentioned MOC briefly when I was talking about the pre-startup safety review. So looking at any time you have a change at your facility, the procedures in place, making sure that that's documented properly. Instant investigation. Anytime you have a release or a near miss, you should be filling out some forms, looking at what happened, why it happened, and how you can prevent it from happening in the future. Emergency planning and response, making sure that you're ready at your facility for anything that were to happen, looking at different scenarios that may occur and having a plan in place. Performing compliance audits, making sure that your program is staying up to date. And lastly is employee participation, making sure that employees know their responsibilities within your system. Oh, skip the slide. So all of these elements are also very similar to what is in OSHA PSM and EPA RMP regulations. In most of the cases, you can use one program to meet the requirements of all three of these programs. The one that I wanted to focus on today, though, which isn't necessarily a specific element, but where CAPP really stands apart from these other organizations, is the way that they conduct their audits. They're a little bit more of a structured audit process than you'd see from the other regulatory agencies. This is due partly because of the amount of facilities in Nevada compared to some other states like California and Texas. The amount of facilities there are on the lower side. This allows for the CAPP auditors to look at all of the facilities a little bit more closely. So in the past and continuing, CAPP audits are expected to occur on an annual basis at all facilities. In the past, what the auditors have done is they've come in and looked at 3 elements at a time. So this is right when they were starting up their audit process. They wanted to make sure that they came in, got a good look at each of the elements, so opposed to looking at all dozen or so elements during one audit. They'd pick out a few at a time, do a really in-depth analysis, and make sure that they really understood your program. Then the next year they'd come back and do 3 more, and so on. So at this point, I think they've gone through all of the elements at least once, most of them twice, and they provided a grade for each of the elements. The way that they've been doing this is through an established checklist. This is going to help guide not only the auditor but the facility on the expectations of each of the element. They come in, look at your program, compare it to what they have on their checklist, and they'll provide a grade for each of the sections. You can see here on this slide is a printout of something you can get on their website This is just kind of the heading section of the training program audit checklist. As you can see, I've highlighted there that there are the two different scores. You get a Part A score and a Part B score. The Part A score focuses on the actual program policy that's in place at your facility. So they're going to be reading through it, making sure it matches up with their expectations. And Part B is going to be records and implementation. So are you saying what you're doing in your program policy? So in order to prepare for an audit, here's some really quick and easy tips. First is to make sure that all of your elements are up to date. Most elements should be checked on at least an annual basis, kind of in line with how CAPP is auditing your program. Others may need a little bit more attention. I've specifically called out training and maintenance because these are going to have a lot of records associated with them. So anytime anybody is doing training associated with the covered process, you want to make sure that that's being documented and is where you are saying that it's supposed to be based on your program element. And the same goes for the maintenance records. The next element is to know your program. Take time to know where you're addressing the different regulations within your program. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this when I'm discussing the audit checklists, but you want to make sure that you know where your information is. So on the Nevada CAPP or NDEP website, you'll be able to find data forms that are associated with each program element. You can go to the Nevada CAPP page, go to Program Guidance, and you'll see a section that says Data Forms. There will be one for each element, and it will give you some pointers and highlight information that the regulator is going to want to see or have prepared before the audits. In most cases, they will ask you to do the data form prior, but they may not. I would say if you know that a certain element is going to be audited, go through the data form first, make sure that you're filling it out so that the information is easily accessible. In addition to the data forms, you can also find the element audit worksheets. These are going to be a great resource when you're preparing. My recommendation, and I've done this with some clients in Nevada, is that after developing an element or improving on an element that was already in place, go through the audit worksheet and make sure that the facility is comfortable with where the element stands. And I have an example of that here. So this is as part of the process safety information audit sheet. One of the questions specifically drawn out here is, have all pressure relief devices been listed with the following information from the actual valve? They want to make sure you know the set pressure and the capacity and when the defined overpressure is. And this should be taken from the valve nameplate or vendor data if available. So you can kind of go in and just say, oh yes, we have that, right? But during your prep, I think it's really beneficial to not only say, yes, we are meeting this requirement, but also to call out specifically where that requirement is being written. That way you're ready when the auditor comes in if they have any questions. So if they have a question about where you're documenting the pressure relief devices, you can reference your audit worksheets and say, oh yes, we meet the pressure relief devices requirements, see Appendix B in the PSI section. That way, anytime that they might have a question about where something is or weren't able to find something, you might be able to point it out, which will result in fewer findings for your facility. After the audit, you will probably have some findings that need to be resolved. Nevada CAPP issues a report discussing all of the different things or deficiencies that they found within your program. This is a great guide. They should be laying out very specifically where they thought you were deficient. Since these audit worksheets get pretty detailed, it should be pretty clear what needs to be added. I would say stay in contact with the regulators. I've spoken with Kelly and Carrie with Nevada CAPP. They are very helpful, and I think everybody here has the same goal, which is to make sure that you are compliant and everybody's working safely. Okay, before we wrap up today, I wanted to show a few sample checklist questions. So It doesn't go quite into this detail in the regulations, but these are what the audit worksheets are going to look like that the auditors are going to be using in order to look at your program. So this is one specific section within process safety information. We all know that we need to have things like pressures and temperatures listed in PSI, but some of these things here on the list might not be quite as obvious. They want clearly listed the minimum pipe and vessel wall thickness, rotating equipment tolerances, and other process mechanical limits, whatever those might be for different kinds of equipment. Now, if it's not clearly in your PSI section, it might be in something like the operating manuals for that equipment when you received it. If you don't have it in the section, what you need to do is at least make a reference to where you know where it is, so that way if the auditor has any questions, you can pull out where that information is held. For operating procedures, not only to ensure that you're including information about all of the operating procedures that you have at the facility, but a lot of these items here listed are about making sure that you're maintaining it properly and who it applies to at the facility. The last list that I have here is a few things listed out in the process hazard analysis tab. So when we think of PHAs, we pay a lot of attention to the process flow itself to make sure that that's properly safeguarded. There are other requirements, however, as part of a PHA, and one of those is making sure that you're properly addressing human factors. So here it kind of helps you out with that, is it lists a few things that they want to make sure are being properly considered as part of your human factors checklist. So it kind of works both ways, right? While you may have to change the way you're doing things, it can also be for the better to ensure that you're properly addressing different items. Okay, here's a few upcoming webinars that RMP is going to be having. On April 27th, we will be discussing compliance audits and the viability of a living program with John Johnson and Vincent Sate. May 4th, Steve Marr and Alex Matula will be presenting on the modernization of PSM and RMP programs and how to meet the new federal level regulations. May 23rd, IIAR standards and how they apply to RAGAGET by Stephanie Smith. And I will be presenting with Steve Marr on June 27th about HAZOP and LOPA and how to effectively use those studies to build a mechanical integrity program. All right, thank you everybody for listening in on this webinar. We're going to open it up for questions.
All right, thank you, David. We have a question from the audience. If I get less than 100% grade on my element audit, should I be concerned?
Okay, so we're all shooting for perfection with these audits, and the ultimate goal is to get to 100%. However, at this stage, I wouldn't be concerned about not having a 100% grade. What I would say is this highlights the weak points in the element or where there may be deficiencies, and this will give you the information to properly address what needs to be fixed. What can become an issue is if the auditors are finding the same deficiencies year after year. But what they want to see is if they have a finding that's resulting in a lower grade than 100%, that you have an action plan in order to meet that requirement moving forward. Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you everybody for the presentation, and have a good day.